Lord, Lord willing, we're going to do this week and then 2 weeks from now. So if you happen to come back and can bring this back with you, that will be fine. We hopefully will have enough if you don't. I want us to think tonight about specifically prayer as a part of our spiritual life and our spiritual formation. And I have an open-ended question. There's no trick or trap in this, in that I don't know exactly the term. But, and I'm just thinking physically, there are various types of body scans that can be done for different types of things. Everything from cancer, bone scans. I'm just thinking physically. We can get all kinds of kind of pictures of ourselves. And I wanted to start and say, if we could do a body scan of your soul, what would your soul look like tonight? Everybody understand what I'm trying to do with that? I don't have anything against shampoo, against soap, against deodorant, against body products. In fact, bought some toothpaste today. That's all good. But I wonder, do we ever invest a fraction of the things in our lives, in our spirit that's eternal, that we do in our body that's physical? Everybody kind of okay? Just kind of stumbling in to say that, but I just want you to kind of think about that. And like I said, I don't watch a lot of advertisements because a lot of them are designed to make us unhappy with either what we have or who we are or how we look or something. And that's a part of the nature of advertising, is to make you want something else. And learning to be content in certain areas of our life is really important, but I still want to go back to this kind of this investment type thing. What would your soul look like if you invested an equal amount, and it's not just money, it can be both focus and attention, to taking care of your spirit that you do your body? Everybody kind of okay with kind of where I want us to think about that? I want us to start on the back for a second. Looking at some things on spirituality, when I saw this, just several things just clicked. They just kind of went ding, and it was just very, very helpful. And a part of what we'd like to do over this week and a couple of weeks is just be thinking of what are some suggestions of additional things that we can do to make those investments in our spirit and in our soul that we appropriately make within our physical body. For those who are listening, we have a circle, and on the top of the circle talks about, and again, these are spiritual disciplines and things. There are some things that we do as an individual that no one else can do except us. And I don't know when this will be for you. We all need to have some times that just belong to God. It's just a part of our lives. And give me just a second. I sat through business meetings for 4 years that heating was a waste of time and money, so it's nice to be able to be warm in the church building. For example, unless there's something real important, I try not to listen to any media before 10 o'clock each morning. I can't help it if there was a robbery. I can't help it if there was an accident. I can't. And you just stop and think, what are all the things that are on the daily news? And when I was commuting back and forth, yes, you need to know where traffic is. I understand that. But just as a general practice, I just try to have a blackout on all media until 10 o'clock in the morning. For some people, they need to be tuned in for business and work. I understand that. But you stop and think about it, so many things in our lives are organized by other people other than just us. And one of the things that Sheila does occasionally and did recently, 2 days, she goes and has a 2-day silent retreat with no music, no noise, no electronics. And I assume because I talk so much at home, she has to have a time by herself just to not process anything at all. But you stop and think about it, some people would go absolutely crazy if they went 2 days with no media, no noise. This is allowed. This is allowed. No one's saying, Mom, will you please fix breakfast? No one is just doing all this other stuff. And to just have time to be with God and with yourself is something that we can do, but we have to make a calculation for that. One of the early classes that I took on spirituality, the guy was talking about, again, this time alone. And I got tickled in the class, and those who are long-term members, growing up on a farm, we had a farm about 20 kilometers away from our home, and it would take 3 days to plow it. So Dad would drop me off at sunrise with gas, oil, water, lunch, personal necessities, and then he would come get me at dark. So I'm out on a tractor by myself, no radio, no noise or anything, from sunrise till dark. And my kid said, "How did you keep from going crazy?" And I said, well, that's part of why you learn most of the songs in the hymn book by memory. Kent and I did this a lot. We would sing a song and then try to start the next verse with the ending word of the song we just finished and sing through the songbook. It's amazing how the clouds change from sunrise to sunset if you're just outside. We would start on the outside of the field, and these hawks especially would be way, way up. And if you ever plow up any rodents, rats or mice or anything, here comes the hawk screaming down and stuff. And I don't know how to say this other than you just kind of have to be comfortable in your own skin to spend all day with nobody to talk with, nothing to listen to or nothing else. It's just you and God. And so this will vary in different ways, but I just want to ask you, how much individual focus do you have in your walk, in your relationship with God right now? Okay? So we're going to go to the bottom. There are also, and none of these are competitive. There's a different balance at different times in our lives. In the same way that no one can replace my personal responsibility for my spirituality, there are some other things that we can't do without a community. One of my absolute heroes in the Bible is Joseph. 17 years of age, your sorry brothers sell you off as a slave. I've just tried to imagine being 20 years old, kind of in the prime of life, and just kind of clenching my fist at night, going to sleep at just the frustration and anger at your rat bug brothers for sending you off. But what do we find out? Oh, we're going to name our children, God has made me fruitful. God has made me forget my affliction. And then later, oh, you meant it for harm, but God meant it for good. For most of us, on the other side, there are some things that we can only do in community, and that's why God organized the church. And so at different stages of our lives, we will have a balance with different ones of these. You don't have to write anything down, but if you were going to give percentages currently, what percentage of your spiritual focus is an individual focus? And what percentage of your spirituality is community focused? Our son was 9 months when we moved. Heather comes 18 months later, Annalise 20 months later. And I would come home some days and would be met with, we will now use big people's words. We will now talk in whole sentences. You will not wipe snot on me when you hug me. And I would say, do I need to leave or do you need to leave? Could I please just be in my own house for a while and listen to, we'll go feed the ducks. So we would collect the kids and go do that. We all go through different stages of life where it's a challenge to do one side or the other. But having said that, life continues to change all the time. And so one of the things that I think is important for us in terms of, again, this kind of this spiritual analysis is if you were going to give a percentage, how much of the things that you invest are going to be things that you are doing with you and God primarily? And then how much of your spiritual development have to do with things that you're doing with either a brother or sister or collectively with worship? Everybody okay so far? Comments, questions? One of our professors who taught English, Daryl Tippins, wrote a book on spirituality. And you stop and think, English professor, can I do this? I'm talking about the head, very bright, very intellectual, very academic. And I read an article, and he was just talking about his spirituality. I didn't know. I didn't have any assumptions. I would lean toward, since he was an English major, there was probably a lot of emphasis on the individual, whether this is on quiet time. At that particular time, nearly all of his spiritual disciplines were community. He said, I'm trying to get together with 2 or 3 brothers just for us to talk and to pray and to do this. I'm trying to find a singing group. We have a group that are visiting people who are shut-ins and things. And at this stage of his life, probably because he was a professor, the individual part was pretty well being taken care of. And so his priority at that stage, he was intentionally doing more things on the community focus to kind of fill out that side of his life. Okay? So just want you to kind of, and just be thinking within a week, a month, whatever your schedule is, how much of my focus with my walk with God is, and again, no one can take the place of you and God. But the other side is, that's the reason why there's a church, and there are some things that are best done collectively. And how am I doing in terms of balancing those out at this stage of my life? The other side is that, and I tend to be more on the right, some people are very structured with their spirituality. And we'll be talking about some things that I do just routinely. It's just a normal part of the walk. And we were at the end of a cotton field one day, and being the oldest son, my job was to sharpen the hose. So I got the first drink of water and then would literally get down on my knees and would take a file and sharpen everyone's hoe, because some of our rows were a half mile long. So it's going to be a mile before we got back to water, and we wanted to be as sharp as we could when we left. So that was my job. Got a drink, I'm getting out, I'm sharpening the hose. My mom opens the newspaper and she says, okay, we're 40 degrees, we're out in a cotton field. And my mom says, there's something called a basketball camp at Oklahoma Christian. Do you think you'd like to go? And I'm thinking, let's form a committee. 40 degrees in a cotton field or a basketball camp. I wonder, Jaron, which of these sounds like something I would like to do. And I said, well, I would love to go. And she said, well, and so it was one of the very first ones they had. I never suffered playing inside in the summer heat because I was outside in the summer heat all day long as it was. And so basketball camp was just virtual vacation, and just thrived in it. But here's why I'm telling you this. Our coach came out, teacher. He was 6'5", and my hip hurts, and I have arthritis in my knees, and I used to know how to do this. I'm guessing he's 26, 27. From the three-point line, he made 21 shots in a row that didn't touch the rim. So you think, here you are, a little guy, and you're sitting along the wall, and this guy comes out. I used to know how to do this, but I've got, my knees are bad, and my back hurts, and everything else. And without warming up, if you know anything about basketball, from the three-point line, he makes 21 net shots. He made 25 before he missed his first shot. There was 1 week he made 34 shots in a row. Well, everything he said after that was gospel about basketball, because even if his knees were bad and his back hurt, you think, okay, what could he do when it was all setting us up. But here it came. He said, every player at some times or another doesn't have a good first half. It just doesn't work. And he said, you always need to have something in mind to get yourself back on track when you're a little bit out of step. And he said, what I do is that I get on the free throw line, I have a friend, I put my toe and I do not move it, and I try to get that free throw down. But he said, I have a plan for what I'm going to do when I'm not on track. So this is my question. What do you do when you're not exactly where you want to be doing spiritually? Do you have a plan? I have a routine. Here's something I'm going to do. Two things I'm going to mention. Lord willing, we'll touch back on these. The single most helpful thing I've done spiritually is, and again, I usually start on the first, but I read 5 chapters from Psalms, and I read 1 chapter from Proverbs. 5 times 30 is 150. If there's 31 days, then I do 1 day for 119 because it's so long. And so in my Bibles that I carry, I want to go ahead and have you can do it in your head, but since probably 1975, 1976, I've done this every January, anticipating who knows what's going to happen, what's going to take place in this coming year. Our squirrels will store nuts to be able to find in the wintertime, and you think, with the new year, we don't know all the things that are going to happen. Let's go ahead and start making spiritual investments in just a very structured way. Typically, in the average year, I'll do that 4 or 5 times. Have you ever spiritually felt like you're walking on a curb instead of on level ground, and it's just not quite there? And that happens to all of us, and every time that happens, the first thing I think of, and I don't have to wait till the first of the month, but if I feel myself I'm either slipping, I'm not where I should be, I just need some time to kind of reprogram, then I go back to that. Teacher, what is the first and greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God with, and we're going to talk about this specifically, heart, soul, mind, and strength. All but 11 of the Psalms have the word God or Lord or something like that within the first 2 verses. And to be able to read Israel and the early church's hymn book for centuries, I'm thinking primarily of strengthening this relationship, and wisdom has a lot to do with timing. Wisdom has a lot to do, I think it's chapter 24. One verse says, do not answer a fool according to his folly. And what does the very next verse say? Answer a fool according to his folly. And you think a part of wisdom is, and we've all been here, I really should have said something and I didn't. Or, Lord, let me just keep that thought to myself next time. I really shouldn't have said that. And so I think of these 2 major teachings to be reinforced with the sense of praise and glorifying and acknowledging God in our lives, and having a sense of the vertical impacting the horizontal with our relationships that are there. In terms of just the New Testament, and I don't know if you've ever done this before or not, and this is a little bit gross, but I still think about this. We have interns that work with us for a year, and one of the things that I always talk with them about is spiritual bulimia. Anybody have any idea what I would be talking to an intern about with spiritual bulimia? If you only study to teach the next lesson, it's only coming in and going out. One of our teachers encouraged us, set aside, and for me it was Titus. We moved the 3rd of April of 79. And so the rest of that, in fact, for 18 months, I tried to read a little bit of Titus every day with no class assignments, no teaching on it, and there's a lexicon. And I tried to look up every Greek word in the book of Titus, not to teach the next lesson, but just to digest, internalize. Can I use the word crock pot and you understand what I'm trying to say? What's the difference in a microwave and a crock pot? Say again?
Slow cooking.
Yes. And again, can you see what I'm saying spiritually? There are things that we need to study for a class or study for this and that, but something that's irreplaceable is just studying for yourself to nourish the soul. And just be thinking again, if I could take a picture of my soul, what am I doing to kind of feed and nourish that? And so, and here's some possibilities. A book like Philippians that you guys are studying for that. What we were encouraged to do is to take just a small paragraph and use that for home base and then kind of explore the rest of the book. And so you stop and think, Colossians would be perfect for that, 2 Peter, Sermon on the Mount. And if you've never done that, there's something really helpful just to have a small part of Scripture that you just try to, can I use the word ingest, digest, feed upon, and you're doing that just for your understanding and your walk with God, not to argue, teach, convert someone else. This is just time with you. And all of us need some structured activities. I listened to a mother, this is a conversation about a mother who was dying and she had 4 children. And before she died, she called them in and she told the first one, "You have always been my favorite." And the other 3 were kind of going, "Oh, we always knew, you know." Years ago, the Smothers Brothers, "Mom always liked you best," was one of their lines in this. And the other 3 kids were a little bit dejected. Here, Mom's dying, and she's finally let the cat out of the bag. And she says, "I always liked you best, da 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 da." And then she came to the second one, and she says, "And I've always liked you best because," and before she died, she told each of the children something about them that she liked best. And that's how I feel about the 4 Gospels. My favorite Gospel is the one I'm reading because it's better than the others. And there's just something unique about each one of them. But if I had to choose one, it would have to be John. And so again, when I'm not in balance, then I just want to spend time and in fact, recently have done that just for other reasons, and just slowly read through and listen, put yourself in the audience, try to walk in the shoes. And all of us need some structured time that's just primarily for ourselves and not for someone else. The other side, and when I first did this, I talked with a number of older guys. I was surprised the majority of the older generation of guys that I talked to were more unstructured. I asked Don Klingenberg, "When do you have your daily devotional?" And he said, "What's that?" I said, "Do you have a quiet time?" He says, "No, I just live and breathe with God all day long." He said, "Stopping and having a personal devotional seems real foreign to me. I just try to do that all day. I don't function that way. I'm much more on this side." One of our wonderful preachers in Oklahoma City had preached at this church for 35 years. And Leon Dennis, I said, Leon, what do you do in terms of your spirituality? He says, the same type thing, quiet time, personal devotional. He said, what are you talking about? Which is kind of funny when you're a younger guy and you ask an older preacher, what do you do for your personal devotion? He said, I just keep 2 Bibles open on my desk, and in between phone calls and everything else, I just read through these 2 Bibles all day long. And so, do you see what I'm saying? We're all, by personality, disposition, stage of life, going to be different. I would maintain, and again, since I'm on the structured side, I would really struggle if all of mine was unstructured. And here's the thing. At a point in time, all of us have done this, we can get so busy taking care of other people that we're not taking care of ourselves. This is a little bit critical, so just process this for a second. This isn't totally wrong, but there is a side that is wrong. Do you remember the expression, Jesus, others, and you type thing? How does it start?
Jesus first, others second, yourself last.
Okay. And there's a point of that that's true. Jesus emptied himself and on and on. But think about this. What if you do that all the time and you're always third and you never take time to take care of yourself? International flight. If this mask falls down from above, what's the instructions say? Help me, Tim. What do you do?
Put it on first.
And then what are you to do? Why do you put it on yourself first? You see what I'm trying to say spiritually? And that's why having this sense of balance, and our schedules change, our lifetime things changes, and I'm not trying to be cheeky or sarcastic, but you're the only person you will sleep with for the rest of your life. And at some point, if you always are taking care of everyone else, if you're always looking after other people, if you're always doing that and you don't take time to do this, then at some point there's going to be a spiritual train wreck and you can't help other people because you haven't helped yourself. As you read the Gospels, Jesus went to a solitary, a lonely place to pray. Can I say he was peopled out? It was just wall-to-wall people, and at some point, the disciples, oh, where is he? Oh, he has gone to a solitary place to pray. And so that's what I wanted to start with, and for you to just kind of be thinking about that in terms of texture. How does this work in your life right now? And be thinking about the balances that are there. We're going to start at the front and read through Luke 11. 11:1, Jesus was praying in a certain place. And again, do you see what we've been talking about? As busy as he is, as many people as he taught, if we walk in the steps of Jesus, we will find time to take care of ourselves, because it's not selfish for us to build our own spirituality, because, and this is one of my brother Kent's statements, we can't teach and share with someone else what we don't have ourselves. So you think in the long run, if I want to be salt and light and leaven, how can I be the salt if I'm not have salt within myself? And how can I be a spiritual help to other people if I've been so busy helping other people that I haven't taken care of myself? I always find this interesting. The disciples did not ask Jesus how to preach. The disciples did not ask Jesus how to do personal evangelism. The disciples did not ask Jesus, how do we take care of the poor? Do you see where I'm going with this? This always stands out to me. Having been with him and walked with him and lived with him, the primary thing they wanted to know was, Lord, teach us to pray as John taught his disciples. So here is Luke's account of what we call the Lord's Prayer. Hallowed, about Father, be your name. The rule of God, the kingdom started in Acts 2, but I think it's I grew up hearing we shouldn't pray thy kingdom come because the kingdom came in Acts 2. I totally agree with that. I also think the majority of the people who are living in North Ryde and in Sydney, the kingdom has not come into their hearts. If we're thinking about was the kingdom established, it answers yes, but the majority of people you deal with through the week, the kingdom has not come into their lives. And if we're thinking of the expanding and the growing kingdom in that sense, we can still pray for the kingdom to come into more and more people's lives. Give us daily bread, forgive us our sins as we forgive everyone who's indebted to us. And then Luke uses the word friend more than the other Gospels do. Which of you who has a friend will go to him at midnight and say to him, friend, lend me 3 loaves? A friend of mine has arrived on a journey. I have nothing to set for him. He will answer from within, do not bother me. The door is locked. My children are in bed with me. I can't give up and give you anything. I tell you, though, he will not get up and give him anything because he is his friend. And I wonder what the other translations say. This one says, because of importunity, he will rise and give him what he needs. We're going to come back and look at that. I tell you, and look at these terms, ask, seek, and knock. Ask, it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened. Everyone who asks receives, and he who finds, to him who knocks it will be opened. And then this thing about the Father, and whether it's fish or scorpion or things, an earthly father gives what's needed, and the same thing's going to happen with our spiritual father. Do you and I pray to God with such energy and enthusiasm that at some point he thinks, let's just answer this because they're just going to keep knocking on the door if I don't? One of my friends studied in a Jewish university for over a decade, and he said most Jews pray like this, and most Christians pray like this. And there is a sense, and again, we should always be reverent, and in my family, especially my grandfather, praying was a matter of a softer voice, respect to God. But look at this word, shameless, persistent, impudent, a lack of sensitivity to what's proper, carelessness about the good opinion of others, shameless, ignoring convention. When our kids were in school, we were in the PTA, the parent organization. We had a lady named Jerry Gore. If I ran a business in Midwest City, I would just tell people, you either lock the door when you see that woman coming or don't let her in, because she would not leave until you donated money to the PTA. She was just such an this is for the children. And anytime we needed, we just said sick 'em. And we just turned this lady loose on businesses and everything else. And she had no embarrassment. She would ask, one guy said she'd ask a beggar for his last nickel. She just had this is so important, let's go do this. Those of you who know my younger brother, he has a part of this in his personality as well. To my knowledge, my brother is the only person who has ridden a live horse on stage at Oklahoma Christian to make a chapel announcement. So chapel's over, you hear clomp, 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 curtains open, Sheila's trying to crawl under her chair because here's her brother-in-law on stage on a live horse, mic'd to make a chapel announcement at Oklahoma Christian about Western Day that's coming up. Well, one of the things that we all need to think about is that anything I ask God for, He has heard something about that from someone else. And can I just use our word boldness? We're encouraged to have a sense of boldness when we approach God. And the dotted line, I have a dear friend, John Maples, grew up in South Africa, and a couple of times he said, I've stormed the gates of heaven today on your behalf. You think, what a friend. You know, it's not like, God, if you don't, you know, if you're not too busy, God, if this is okay. No, I stormed the gates of heaven today on your behalf. We're to have this sense of boldness about us. I want to turn, because we're going to come back and look at some things. I want to turn to the back of the first page. Assignment may not be the best word, but I'm going to say, let's use the word encouragement. Here's something I'd like for you to think about. When I was a student at Oklahoma Christian, I came across a tract called Manna in the Morning. And you think, okay, manna, God providing food in the wilderness, manna in the morning. I missed a couple of these. One of our co-workers gave me this tract a couple of years ago. But in reading it, because I think in terms of like mental pictures and things, this in terms of just daily walk with God is something that I just do nearly constantly. But let's just go through it and then we'll come back. So the suggestion is Monday, pray for missionaries, anybody that you know that's spreading the word. So since we have been coming here for over 50 years, if I'm going to be praying about spreading the word, I always start in Sydney. And either head north or head south, pray around the country, head to New Zealand, New Guinea, Southeast Asia, and just literally pray around the world. And so Monday is the day to pray for missionaries. Can I pray for other things at other times? Yes. But every Monday, just nearly every Monday, then I'm going to spend some time praying for send forth workers into your harvest, pray for the spreading of the gospel. And so while I can pray about other things, I also know Monday is the day to pray for that. Tuesday is a day to pray for tasks. What are you doing? Who do you meet? What's going on in your personal life right now? And that's kind of just your interaction with other people. Wednesday is workers. Who do you work with? And that can be job related, that can be church related, community related. You know, Jaron, that could include guys you play soccer with. Just who are you in contact with, and be praying about that, open doors and things like that. Tomorrow's my favorite day. Thursday, Thanksgiving. Could we have one day to say thank you and not ask God for anything? Okay. If something comes up, God's not going to care if you ask for something. That's not like that's going to be anything wrong. But I'll just speak for myself. Sometimes you can just get so busy with life that you lose sight of just the overwhelming amount of blessings that God has given to you in your life. One of my aunts worked as a church secretary for 21 years, and she said, when I'm a little bit blue, I take out a 5x7 envelope and I just list my blessings on the back of the 5x7 envelope. And she says, by the time I'm finished listing those, I always feel bad because there's just so many things that are going on. And you stop and think, for all the things that we need and all the things that God wants to hear from us, could we as His children just have one day to say thank you? Friday's the day to pray for family. And what is a family? Well, could be mom, dad, and the kids, extended, could be family here, but family relationships. Saturday to pray for saints. And I especially pray for lost boys, young men, older guys who are unfaithful, but people that I know especially who have wandered away. And then Sunday, a day to pray for sinners. Because I tend to be more on the structured side, this really, really helps. And anytime my life gets out of balance, I immediately know I'm going to start reading Psalms and Proverbs, and I'm going to go back and be very specific in doing this, because what I find sometimes is that when we get a little bit out of step, if we're not careful, we can get into neutral and then we don't do anything at all. Or we substitute something that's worse. And one of the things that's really important, and I'm back with my friend at basketball camp, okay? Cling is coming off the rim, it's not going in. you need to kind of stop and have a reprogramming session. And so he physically had this routine, and anytime I'm not having a good game, I'm going to do this to get back into the swing of things. That happens to all of us at one time spiritually. And so, Gospel of John, Psalms, that to me, I've got to get spiritual nutrients in. Thankfully, not as much, but for all the years playing sports and stuff, I learned that anytime I got a fever blister, I was starting to get run down physically. And initially you think, oh, what a nuisance, I've got a fever blister. Well, after thinking about that for a while, if I'm getting run down, I need some more sleep. And so anytime I start getting a fever blister, I think, okay, if I just ignore this, this is going to get worse and I'm going to get more run down. I may end up getting sick. And this is going to sound kind of crazy, but at a point in time, a fever blister became my friend. And then if I find a little bump, yes, I'll get some stuff to take care of that. But I've either overextended, I'm not getting enough sleep, I had to stay up late for this or that. And if I don't take care of myself with this early warning signal, things are going to get worse. Do you have any type of a spiritual fever blister in your life? Do you know what I'm trying to say? That kind of tells you I'm either getting overextended, I'm not spending enough time doing this. It functions the same way the older cars had more of this. The red light would come, the engine light would come on. What happens if the engine light comes on and you don't check the motor? Yeah. I'm riding in Melbourne with one of our sisters. She's taking me across to something. Steam starts coming out from under the engine, and she says, if I've cooked the motor this time, he's going to put me on the bus. Where I was from, we never used the expression cook the motor, but she had ignored an earlier one, and thankfully it was just a hose that broke and she hadn't cooked the motor. But think about that spiritually. If the more we kind of get to know ourselves physically, there's certain things that we come to learn about ourselves, and the same thing's true spiritually. And in the long run, if I'm getting run down, if I'm not where I ought to be, if I don't do something about that, there's going to be more catastrophic conclusions that come along compared to, whoops, I need to stop and spend more time taking care of some things. I want to do one other thing, and then we're going to close because we'll be touching on this through this. And we'll do more of this next week. But to me, one of the really important things for us to do is to seek to live our lives within the harmony and the relationship. And I do this in physically, Father, Son, and Spirit. And we'll touch on this, Lord willing, later. But you stop and think about it. How does the public ministry of Jesus begin in the Gospel of Matthew? He's in the Jordan River. He's wet, and Spirit descends as a dove, and the Father acknowledges, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. And the whole public ministry of Jesus begins with an interrelationship of Father, Son, and Spirit. Everything about our salvation comes to us through, and again, we'll touch on this next week, the Father has selected us from the beginning of the foundation. The Son saves us, and the Spirit seals us. And so, and I'm trying to do this more with our grandkids, and I just recently kind of kicked myself in and thinking I should have done this earlier. And we'll save most of this for 2 weeks, but here's something that to me is really helpful. There are different times of the day that I literally think the first and the great commandment is to love God, and I touch here, and I know this is a pump, but this is a heart. What would be your soul? I think of my breath and my life. I think of my mind is here, and I think of this as my strength. There are several times through a day that I just going through the day just stop and say, physically, help me today to love you with my heart, with my soul, with my mind, and with my strength. I don't know why, but that I can do the same thing in my head, but it helps me just to think about that physically, because when I was thinking about that, I was thinking, okay, heart's pretty good. Hopefully our head's up here, and this would be strength. What would you do for your soul? I just got thinking, that part of breath and life, the part that is eternal, he's a lump of clay, and God breathes into his nostrils the breath of life, and man becomes this living soul. And so I just think about this physically, and touch. Help me to love you today with my heart, with my soul, with my mind, and with my strength. And what's the second greatest? Love our neighbors ourselves. So I just want to encourage you, if you've never done this before, Monday, missionaries. Doesn't have to just be missionaries, it be people that are teaching, reaching out, doing that. Tuesday, day for task. What's God given you to do that you can kind of commit to him? Wednesday, people that you work with, associate with, have contact with. Thursday, tomorrow. And like I said, if you've never done this before, it's a little bit hard initially because we're so used to asking God for stuff. And like I said, he's not going to be upset if we need to ask something. But I try to have just one whole day that my goal for the day is primarily just to say thank you. And I just think there's something deeply enriching when, rather than just receiving, we stop and just kind of take an inventory of all the things we have to be thankful for. Friday, day to pray for families. Saturday, SA, a day to pray for saints, both living and those who are struggling. And then Sunday, who might walk through the door because we've been praying and God opens the opportunity for someone to hear the gospel and to do that. And obviously you can tell, because of conditioning and background, I tend to be more on the structured side. But if you have never done that, I would just encourage you to go through that. Obviously, Lord willing, next week's lectureship, providing we're here the week after, I may just say, anybody get to do that? How did it go? What kind of came to mind as you did that? And what has helped me, again, because I do it regularly, but anytime I get on the spiritual curb and I start struggling, then I have go-to. The same way, okay, I need to get some extra sleep. I need to get some time physically when I find out I'm getting run down. And the sooner I acknowledge that and do something about it, the quicker I'm going to get back to the level. And we've all had that chance of kind of walking on the curb. And yours may be a little bit different, but I would just encourage you, always have something that you're going to immediately go to help you, because if you don't, then you're just going to get further and further and further away, and it takes longer to get back. Comments, observations, questions as we leave? We'll touch on some other things. There's more than we can do with these, but Lord willing, we'll do that. And it's always a privilege and a delight to be with you. God bless.